Excellent. I can hope you can see the slides. And yeah, it's a pity that I can't be with you because I really planned to be at this conference and really also to have the experience of Ars Electronica. And we talked a lot about unforeseens. You know, I told everybody that the strike, the Bahn strike, is not really kind of have any impact on my travels, because first it's the Austrian railway company, and it's a day after the end of the strike, and I don't know why the Austrians didn't manage to send the train to Germany, so I was not possible to really participate. So this is unfortunate. Still, I'm very happy that I have the opportunity to be here and share some thoughts on utilizing digital means in TD learning to foster sustainability transformations with you. And you have already, you know, I will pick up several of the aspects that have already been mentioned in previous talks. So I will try to adapt the insights to the things that you have already heard. But I think that was really very nice how the previous talks prepared the ground for what I wanted to share with you. So I want to kind of go through the title from the end. So the title of my presentation starts or ends with the means sustainability transformations contributing to fostering sustainability transformation. So the first part will really about, well, what is it when I'm talking about sustainability transformations? And we have heard from Ulf already in the morning that we have these great challenges, and also from Christopher, who touched upon you know, what is it that we really have to educate our students for. Then I will come to the second part, which is transdisciplinary learning. Why do I think that transdisciplinary learning is a very promising approach to really foster sustainability transformations? And then I will end with the means, digital means to really contribute that these transdisciplinary learning processes can even be more facilitated and more effective to contribute to sustainability transformations. So this is kind of the three parts of my presentation. I try to stick to the 30 minutes, which is always a challenge, but I will really also give you the opportunity to then ask questions if you have questions, or transition into the more discursive part of the symposium, where you can really then engage in the roundtable discussions. So first to sustainability transformations, or transformations as such, and we have already heard a lot about it, but still I think it's important for me at least to depart from the object, or from the end. What do we want to achieve with all the things that we are doing? So first, there is a need for accelerating transformations, and this became clear again some weeks ago with the publication of the latest IPCC report, which made very clear that if we want to reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, 1.5 degrees temperature increase target, to stay ideally below this target, we need to act much faster, and we need to change and cope with our CO2 budget or greenhouse gas budget much more carefully. You know, in the last report, they talked about 12 years. Now it even gets a shorter period of time. And the other one is, unfortunately in German, this is a Impulspapier, a discussion paper of the Sachverständigenrat für Umweltfragen. It's kind of an expert panel that consults the German legislation, and they said in this impulse paper, and you might know, many of you probably know that we have soon elections in Germany, and they made very clear that the next legislative period, that means the 4 years period that will come this election in 2021 is a decisive period if we really want to get the regulations in place that help us then to really cope with these tremendous challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss, etc., etc. So there is some urgency. And if we talk about transformations, I just want to briefly remind ourselves, you know, transformation, transition is often synonymously used. What are we talking about? We are talking about radical structural changes of societal subsystems in a co-evolutionary process on different scales. So it's not a small thing that we want to, or that we need to achieve within the next 10 years, where we need to set in place the regulations within, according to this expert panel, within the next 4 years. We really need to substantially change the way we live together, we interact as societies together. This was also mentioned in the previous talks, but just to remind ourselves that on the one hand side, transformations or transitions are happening. So this, on the left-hand side, you see a picture of this big transformations, and you know, from with tool making, that means the change from hunter-gatherers to agricultural societies. Then we had this huge transformation from the agricultural societies to the industrial societies. Now we have, or we are in the midst of this transformation to information or knowledge society. So that means transformations are happening, and they are not only happening in this long-term periods, but you see here the iPhone, the invention of the iPhone, where I always tell my kids that I know a time before the iPhone, and I know a time before mobile phones a lot, but this has fundamentally changed our societies, you know, and we are in the midst of a digital transformations. We have heard about this in the previous talks, which also has implications, and there is the periodic table of elements, where you see all the dark blue elements are parts of these mobile phones. That means it also has implications on the material basis of that we use in our societies. So transformations are happening, but if we talk about sustainability transformations, two aspects are key, and we also touched upon those in the previous talks. The first one, and this is the donut that you might have seen previously by Kate Raworth, who kind of said, well, on the one hand side, we need to we live in a world where we have planetary boundaries, referring to climate change, fresh water usage, or chemical pollutions. But there are also limits if it comes to societal interactions, to justice questions. That means that everybody on Earth should have a reasonable income, good education, social equity, etc., etc. And this defines kind of this sustainable development within safe and just boundaries. But what I want to say here is, if we talk about sustainability transformations, and this has also strong implications for our educational purposes and learning purposes, then we have on the one hand side an idea and a normative guiding idea in which direction these transformations should go. And this was also mentioned in the talks previously, we live in a highly complex world that requires us to deal with uncertainties and unknowns, where we have to understand emergent patterns and kind of actors that act in this complex world want to contribute to sustainability transformations. They also have to need to deal with aspects like emergent phenomena, understanding of patterns, etc., etc. So this is kind of the situation where we are departing from. And if we really want to contribute governing these transformations, and then on the other hand also preparing kind of actors to really contribute to governing these transformations from a knowledge perspective. And this is in the transdisciplinary field, these types of knowledge have been discussed since more than 20 years. Then we need, on the one hand side, systems knowledge. That means a better understanding what is the current situation, how do certain behaviors of system, how do they emerge, system structures and processes. We need to think about the future, and I think this this was made very tangibly clear by Christopher, that all of our educational endeavors should be also including this question about the future. What future do we want, engaging with future development? So we have kind of these system knowledges, but we also have, if we have this normative guiding idea, we also have target and normative knowledge. What is problematic at the current state? What is a desirable future situation? And I think this was by Ulf. He made this also very clear, that this is a making good decisions is a very important part if we think about our learning and education endeavors. And there is a third type of knowledge, which is really this action-oriented knowledge or transformation knowledge. How can we really get into action? And I think the longer, the more it is also for our students or for us as learners. And you will see that I understand all of us as learners in these transformation or transition processes. How can we really contribute to making change? How can we act and create this action-oriented knowledge? So this leads me to the second part of my presentation, which is about transdisciplinary learning. What do I understand if I talk about transdisciplinary learning? And before I go to transdisciplinary learning, briefly, what is action-oriented knowledge, or how can we come closer to this aspect that is now in many discourses? You come across action-oriented knowledge or transfer knowledge, transformation knowledge, transformative knowledge. So this is in many discourses you find this term. And we, in a recently published paper, we really try to, building on a philosophy of action, but also bringing the different discourses together, try to characterize what is it if we talk about action-oriented knowledge, or what are characteristics, what are traits of action-oriented knowledge. And we departed in asking ourselves, well, what are characteristics of actions for sustainability? And we then derived these three characteristics. That means, on the one hand side, actions for sustainability are intentionally designed. That means they are intentionally designed to contribute to transformation towards, and this is indicated by the Sustainable Development Goals, towards a sustainable future. It involves shared agency. That means it's really multiple actors that help developing, or that need to be involved in these actions through societal interactions, and these actions are contextually realized, so they happen in concrete contexts. This is nothing abstract, but they happen in very concrete context. And if we take this seriously and take the literature seriously, then action-oriented knowledge should have these different characteristics, and I don't go through all of them. I'm happy to share this paper, Caniglia et al. 2021. This action-oriented knowledge should be generative. That means it should draw upon multiple perspectives for the creation of new and alternative socio-ecological, institutional and cultural relationships and arrangements. Then if we go to the shared agency, then we can say on the one hand side that it should be co-produced. That means it's an emergent and collective process where knowledge, not only from an academic side, but also knowledge from other societal domains, including indigenous and local knowledge, that this should be really brought together in a co-creation process. And finally, if we could then go to the contextually embedded side, this idea of emergence comes in. That means it's an open-ended process in concrete contexts where we will not reach the end that we say, well, and this is now exactly the action-oriented knowledge we need, but it's an emergent process where knowledge creation, action will always inform each other. So if we take all of this seriously, and if we look at the ways in which we produce this knowledge, I still like this quote of Jürgen Mittelstraß that he already coined in 2005, where he said, well, if the problems, and I think most of the problems and phenomena we are dealing with don't really fit into clearly defined disciplines or subjects, then we really need to go out of this disciplinary silos and really go beyond subjects and disciplines. And I argue, and this is an interesting discourse within the transdisciplinarity community, but this also requires us to go out of academia and really engage in mutual learning processes. And you realize now I'm entering the field of learning already, in mutual learning processes where we bring together different societal domains to really cope with these societal challenges. So I could now spend the next 30 minutes to talk about transdisciplinarity, but I don't want to do that. But just briefly say, well, in our understanding, transdisciplinarity is a way of doing research. It's a research practice, so it's not our own discipline, because this would already lead into a situation where we kind of would put the term transdisciplinarity ad absurdum, because if we would say, well, this is our own discipline, how can it then be trans? So it's a way of doing research. That means it's also not a method, but it's a way of doing research with the key idea of bringing societal practices and scientific or academic practices together and really create a mutual learning process, departing from a joint problem definition, a problem framing, the creation of a collaborative research team, then the co-creation of solution-oriented and transferable knowledge, and at the end of the day, the reintegration of the insights we gained in this mutual learning processes to contribute solving concrete societal problems, and on the other hand, to really also contribute to the larger body of knowledge to better understand phenomena on a more general basis, to create new methodologies, etc., etc. And the other thing that I just want to briefly mention, and also then give you a concrete example, because we're still on the very abstract, and I hope that I can go in the last 10 to 12 minutes of my presentation to provide you with concrete examples. This was what I really liked also in the previous presentation, to get concrete and really learn from concrete examples. Spaces for such transdisciplinary processes increasingly happen in experimental settings, like real-world laboratories. That means we really create labs in cities where different spaces, where different societal actors, including scientists, learn together from each other to solve concrete societal challenges in an experimental setting. And experimental setting really means it's concrete intervention in a more or less safe space, where we have a clear idea how we learn from these different interventions. So this is a very broad experimentation definition, but this is kind of where I see that a lot of transdisciplinary research, action-oriented research is happening, and where we should also better understand how to create these experiments to really learn from each other and with each other. So to make it concrete, an example from where I'm currently working in and where I'm engaged in different or multiple learning processes is a project that's called Lueneburg 2030 Plus, the city of the future. And this is a project that we started already in 2015, where we, together with 750 students in collaboration with actors from the city, created different visions for the city. So this was the first phase, that students, actors from civil society, and the administration of the city really worked together to create visions. Then we had a second phase, where we really developed measures how to implement this vision or how to bring these visions forward. And now we are in this experimentation phase, and you don't have to fully to understand at all this picture, what the overall idea of the overall research design is. But you see here, this is the experiments. That means in total we have 15 experiments, where we have a structure that we, of planning, then conducting the experiments, evaluation of the experiments, and then asking the questions, how could this be really continued for a longer period of time? And this feeds then into the creation of an integrated master planning for the city. So the key idea is really to also change the planning paradigm in cities from a classical planning paradigm, where we still think, or where still the basic paradigm is that we can control things, to a more emergent and experimental planning paradigm, which comes closer to this complexity idea. And even more concretely, what is an experiment, or what are experiments? One experiment is, and this is now coming to an end, which was very interesting during the Corona crisis, was that together with local retailers, we and two delivery companies and city administration, etc., we experimented how the entire delivery system could be changed in Lüneburg, with this idea of das Rad bringt's, brought by the bike, to really implement a cargo system as a seed for then changing the entire delivery system in the city. And the other one, and this is strongly driven by students, is Lüneburg Maps. It's an open street maps project that now already runs, I think, for 5 or 6 years, where students together with city administration really create maps, pathways through the city, where cyclists, but now it's also about people with disabilities, how they can really navigate through the cities, not only on the quickest paths, but on the most beautiful paths. And this, on the other hand, because the students also indicate, for instance, where are barriers, this also led already to changes in the infrastructure in the city. So this is 2 examples. And this is, what I think, what for me is the learning spaces that we need to really come closer to this, to the competencies that were already, also competencies and skills that are needed to navigate these transformation processes that were already mentioned in the earlier processes, in the earlier presentations. So in transdisciplinary learning, for me, it's really learning on 3 different levels. And we already, and this is great, because then I don't have to introduce this differentiation between single, double, and triple loop learning. We need, from our perspective, really learning processes in this complex world to come closer to a sustainable development. And we need these learning processes on different levels. That means we have now talked a lot about individual learning processes, individual learning processes embedded in concrete contexts. And I really like this notion of, well, learning that happens in the real world, and for the real world. But it's also about transdisciplinary learning as an experiential collaboration in different organizations. How can we change organizations and institutions to really contribute to these sustainability transformations? And finally, a transdisciplinary learning as a societal interaction where different societal actors learn together, work together and experiment together to really foster and govern these transformation processes in a way that helps us contributing to reach or to come closer to sustainable development. So, and I want to end with this aspect of, well, how can digital means contribute to these transdisciplinary learning processes? And I just want to mention two exemplary challenges, of all the things that I have already mentioned. The one is, if we work in this context, how can we really bring the insights from Lueneburg together with the insights that we have at other places? So how can we transfer and scale the insights? And at the end of the day, also, how can we bridge this divide between the global challenges we have with regards to sustainability and the local insights that we are generating? So I think this is one of the key challenges if we talk about transdisciplinarity, or if we do transdisciplinary research, and then if we talk about transdisciplinary learning. And we have heard a lot about competencies, skills that are needed for the 21st century. Here is this was already mentioned in the first talk. I think the World Economic Forum, they really think about these skills. And even if you think about employability, there are skills like complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, etc., etc. But how do you really train or enable, mobilize capacities in students, but also in people from city administration, to really engage in this experimentation and transdisciplinary learning processes? One example, and this was already mentioned, and I'm also happy to share our book, which is available online with you, or the publication that's revolving this global classroom project that was already mentioned. In this global classroom project, we really tried, and there are different typologies of competencies. We have used this typology of key competencies for sustainability, system thinking, future thinking, value thinking, strategic thinking, and interpersonal/intercultural thinking. That this were the competencies that we really wanted to create an environment where our students could further develop these competencies as problem-solving competencies. And we did so in an environment where in the heart we understood learning as a combination of acting, knowing, and being. So, the knowing part is still there, but also the acting and the being parts in this triangle played a major role. And in this relation of virtual and real, and there you see that the digital comes in, and local and global. And what we really did was we created this classroom where we had students at ASU, Arizona State University, students at Leuphana University of Lueneburg. They worked in these two environments, but we had global classroom exchanges on a virtual basis, but then also the students met each other. It was an undergraduate course, and then we transitioned it to an entire master program, where this idea, and unfortunately there is not enough time to get deeper into it, but where also this idea of, well, the students engaged in local phenomena really experienced local challenges, and developed projects to develop solution options for these challenges they experienced on the one hand side in Tempe and Phoenix in Arizona, and on the other hand side in Lower Saxony in Lueneburg. And they exchanged then always, well, what are differences and similarities? But they also did, for instance, and we heard about, you know, this importance of experience-based learning. They also did, for instance, walks in the different transit walks in the different cities, and then exchanged with each other what they experienced in the US and what they experienced as problems in Germany. And out of this idea of a local curriculum emerged. That means really bringing the local experience and the global together. The last two slides I want to share with you, not a curriculum, but a setting or a environment we created. It's the Mobile Solution Workshop. It's a digital visualization environment, and here you see some of the technical features. You know, it's 5 big screens, but for us it was always important. Some of you might have heard about the so-called decision theaters. For us, it was always important that we can bring this solution workshops to the people, so that we don't always have to invite the people to us, but that we can also have the setting in the city hall, in the supermarket, in a critical neighborhood, etc., etc. And the key idea is really that this is an environment where, based on simulation techniques, different simulation models, people can really engage in not a real world experimentation, but we call it often an ex-ante experimentation. So that's really through experimenting with different interventions, changing parameters of scenarios, really get a sense of what does this mean, create capacities to, in the next step, then really get in an informed way into real world experimentations, and then this is fed back into this mobile solution workshop. So here are some key ideas. So it is about interventions in real time, and also getting a feedback. What do these interventions mean? Illustrate the interconnection or the interplay between local actions, global drivers, global impacts, and make abstract facts tangible to overcome, you know, spatial boundaries, temporal boundaries, and the gap between the abstract knowledge and concrete planning. And for us, it's always important that this should happen in both ways. So it's, on the one hand side, it should inform decision making on the ground, but on the other hand, it should also help researchers to generalize and get insights. Well, what are parameters in decision making? How do different parameters in models need to be adapted, so that it also feeds back into more generalizable knowledge. So to wrap up, what I wanted to present you is, or to touch upon, is this idea of transformation. And also there you see that I'm coming from a different angle. So I'm not a educational scientist by training. I got more and more involved in this, but at the end of the day, I am a sustainability scientist, a transformational or transdisciplinary sustainability scientist. So if we want to govern transformation processes, if we want to contribute governing transformation processes, then we need these different types of knowledge. And as we got the sense, I think already this in the previous presentations, scientists are super in creating systems knowledge. They are good in talking about values. Transformation and action knowledge is often neglected. So I think there should be a focus on transformation and action-oriented knowledge, and there should also be, it must be clear that this is also research that we need, and it's on the same level. So it's not kind of first systems, then target, then transformation, and transformations are politics and decision-making and civil society and businesses. But it's also researchers that should contribute to this action and transformation. Transdisciplinary learning, as I said, it's not only on an individual level, but it is important on an individual level, but it's also happening on organizational level and the societal level, a continuous learning process to foster sustainability transformations is needed, particularly if we acknowledge that we live in a complex world with a lot of uncertainties, a lot of unknowns that we need to talk about. And I deliberately use digital means because it's, and this was also mentioned in one of the previous presentations. For me, it's means and not ends. Digital means can contribute to facilitate transdisciplinary learning on these different levels in, for instance, creating learning and experimentation settings that are safer, that help us to also experiment without really engaging with concrete change processes or before we engage in concrete change processes. And it also helps connecting the local and global. If you want to learn more, what we are currently, and I don't have the time to show this short video, I'm happy to share it with you. We are currently working together with colleagues from the Institute for Socio-Ecological Research in Frankfurt, with colleagues from Öko-Institute in Freiburg and Darmstadt and Berlin, and with colleagues from the Zentrum Technologie und Gesellschaft from the Technical University of Berlin. We are currently setting up the TD Academy, which should be a space, or is a space, where all of us can engage in questions revolving around transdisciplinarity. It's also about capacity building for transdisciplinary processes. So I would be super happy if many of you would join the Academy, because at the end of the day, you know, we understand ourselves as initiators of this academy, but it's meant to be an academy where we all learn from each other to make this research practice as effective as possible to help contributing to the change that we want to see. So this is it from my side. I thank you a lot. Oh, now the video starts. So let's skip the video. I thank you a lot for your attention. And as I said, it's a pity that I can't join, and I will probably also not be able to join the roundtable discussion, because if you are at home, then your family realizes that you are at home. And I have already the first duties at home. To really kind of contribute to the family life as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for being here. I ask again, is there a question maybe from the online chat? Okay. I noted myself a question for you. When I prepared for the symposium, what would you say, how can transdisciplinary can stimulate it in a university teaching? Like also kind of what surrounding conditions are mandatory? Because if we want to have transdisciplinarity in research, it has to be also maybe part of the study, of course. But what are factors, or what and how should the learning environment should look like? What are important factors? How to say, yeah.
That's an interesting question, and I think at universities, two short answers or medium short answers. I think this became very clear in the first two talks. I think that if we really want to achieve these skills or want to help students develop these skills, this can only happen if we engage in real world in real world challenges in an experience-based and project-based way. And if we do so, I think we are already very close to the key idea of transdisciplinarity, because for me, you know, there are many definitions of transdisciplinarity. They are all valuable and they are all helpful. But at the end of the day, it's the key of transdisciplinarity for me is that we depart from a societal problem. And my former boss, drawing upon Karl Marx, he said, well, transdisciplinarity means we turn research from head to feet. So we depart from the real world problem and then bring together the insights that we need to, and the disciplines that we need, the knowledge that we need to solve these problems, and then engage in this mutual learning processes. And I think, as I said, I think, yeah, I would even go so far that, you know, if we want to achieve the skills that were mentioned previously, we need to create settings where students engage in project-based learning exactly in this philosophy, departing from real-world challenges and then learning how to navigate in these situations. And then I would say, if we say it's a strongly experience-based and project-based learning settings that we are creating, then I think it's not so far to really say, well, then it's also transdisciplinary learning settings. So this is one strand of answering, and the other one is, at least from my perspective, if we want to take the roles that were described in the first presentation, you know, if we envision the future university, I think we can't really separate the different missions of a university that ideal typically as we sometimes want, even though, you know, we always had the unity of research and teaching. So if we want to achieve this idea of higher education, universities contributing to solving societal challenges, as it was described in the first session, then I think the creation of settings where transdisciplinary research is possible and transdisciplinary teaching, this will go hand in hand. And a lot of what I heard, what you're doing in Linz, is, at least from my perspective, very close in exactly creating this environment and approaches to enable these transdisciplinary learning processes.